Hi everybody, welcome back to another installment of WEGS Garage. As you know, we're working on our gearbox for our TR4 car, and today we're going to be making some more checks on the main shaft as far as gear end float and also play between the bushings themselves. Now, if some of you have astutely noticed, this is not a TR4 transmission. We have a TR4 car with a TR3 gearbox. And we know that. And on the bench, obviously, the parts for the TR3 gearbox, also the workshop manual for the TR3 gearbox, and the blow-apart diagram. Now, looking through, I've compared it. We have the workshop manual for the entire TR4 car and just the gearbox manual for the TR3 gearbox. And I've read through this the last couple of days. There are a lot of similarities between the gearboxes. But yes, you guys are correct. You have got to have the workshop manual for the TR3 transmission. So you're talking apples for apples and oranges for oranges. But again, today we're going to be checking some things on the main shaft, and hopefully if there's enough time, we'll get around to doing the counter shaft as well. The first thing we're going to be checking today is the third speed constant gear float on its bushing. This is the third speed gear and also the bushing that goes inside of it. But to do this, when this is actually assembled on the main shaft, the inside of this bushing fits flush against this surface of the gear itself. Otherwise, this bushing is just going to slop around when you try and measure the end constant gear float. So we have to cheat a little bit here, not really cheat, but get this brass bushing to fit flush with this lip in this area. And to do that, all I'm going to do is slip in this washer so we know that it'll be flush, and then put it over the second speed bushing so we know that the bushing inside the third gear is flush with that lip down in this area. Now, the Triumph TR3 gearbox manual says that there should be a gap between the top of this brass and the steel of anywhere from 4 to 6 thousandths. And to do that, we take a metal straight edge, put it across. I have two feeler gauges here. One is 6 thousandths and one is 7 thousandths. If I take the 7 thousandths feeler gauge and put it in there, it doesn't really want to go in very well. But if I use the 6 thousandths feeler gauge, it does fit. It's a little tight, but it does squeeze into that gap. And it also does it on all sides. And since Triumph says that that tolerance should be 4 to 6 thousandths, I would say that this bushing is in good shape. So now we'll move on to measuring the float on the second speed gear. Now we move on to the second speed constant gear float on its bushing. Here again we have the same problem. Here's the second gear, and here's the bushing that goes inside of it. But just like with the other gear, when this is assembled, there is a washer that goes in this area so that that brass bushing is held flush with this steel inside part. So in order to measure this, I take this washer, put it in here, and then invert it on that other bushing of the same size so I know that the bottom of this brass bushing is flush where it should be with that steel inner flange. Now, measuring this, we're supposed to have a gap between the bottom of this bushing and the steel gear of 4 to 6 thousandths. And we don't have it because this is a 2 thousandths feeler gauge, and I can't even squeeze that in there. I mean, it is really tight. And here again, Triumph says that that gap should be 4 to 6 thousandths. So this bushing should actually be up more like in this area to meet spec. So unless Mark says different, I would label this bushing as probably being out of spec and should be replaced. All right, now we're back to the main shaft, and according to the workshop manual, the next step is to check the overall bushing float with the second and third bushings put on the main shaft itself. They want you to put on the washer with the teeth on it in the grooves, the bushings themselves, this washer, and my arch nemesis, this clip. Remember that from the last episode? Yeah, I had to put it back on here. But at any rate, when you get this all together again, you're supposed to have an end float in this area of 7 to 12 thousandths of an inch. And what I'm getting right now is about 7 thousandths. So according to the manual, this is correct. The only thing that worries me is we already partially condemned the second speed bushing because of the lack of a gap between this flange and the gear itself. So I'm not quite sure how this is all going to fit up. I think the best thing to do is that we will probably go ahead and order a second speed bushing and try this again with new parts in here and then see what we get for an end float. I just wanted to do this to see how close we were to having this overall bushing float within the specs as described in the workshop manual. But that's where we're at right now with the old parts applied to the main shaft. Well, that's going to about do it this week for WEGS Garage. Unfortunately, I have a few honeydews to do around the ranch here. So next week, I promise we'll get into the counter shaft, and hopefully in the next week or two, our parts house will open up because we do need some parts for this main shaft and also the input shaft, but we'll see what happens. Next week, we'll get into the counter shaft. We'll see how it goes with our TR4 car and our TR3 gearbox. Thanks for watching. Mark, take us home.